The unwritten rule of Star Wars is to always start with a ship flying past in space. Based on that then, the new gameplay trailer of Jedi Fallen Order is half right. But it looks, in pace, style and story, Respawn have really hit the nail on the head and are on course for a genuine quality single player Star Wars story. Now EA are aware they need to win back fans, faith and fortune, and Respawn have become their best PR team of late. Launching in a few months during the hectic November schedule, this multi-platform new saga will appease all players on PC and console, well aside Switch players. A quick synopsis of the game is it's set between Episode 3 and 4, The New Hope, and before Rogue One, obviously. Years after Order 66 was initiated, only a few straggling Jedi remain across the galaxy. Our protagonist is Cal Kestis, not to be confused with Kyle Katarn from Jedi Outcast. He was a young Padawan who lost his master during the Order and went into hiding. Trained in the art of the Jedi, he has the potential and will learn more skills throughout this adventure. This will take us over many planets, space and teams with a free style of play incorporated into the linear story. Free from any of the multiplayer or modern based add-ons, this feels both fresh and old school in one, with it being one of a few games from this E3 that was demonstrated with a closed, rehearsed gameplay segment, bringing back many memories of prior classics, one of which is the previous Star Wars 1313. This obviously takes us all back to the beginning of this generation, which was one of the great shining hopes of what next gen would look like. Now this is obviously launched at the end of the generation, and even though it clearly looks now generation, it still looks incredible. Not being a DICE game is not the only change here for the Star Wars license. Respawn are at the heart of this and have also decided to drop the augmented source engine they have made their own from Titanfall to Apex Legends. The free-running parkour-style traversal remains though, giving our Jedi hero an acrobatic approach to exploration and combat. Unreal Engine 4 is the chosen vehicle to deliver this aspiration, and from this Xbox One gameplay shown, if all the info is correct, and they have come to grips with it quickly and impressively. It is a versatile engine that can make demands on some resources of current gen consoles slightly more than they can possibly deliver though, and adding to this is the team have kept their mantra of 60 FPS while still delivering on gorgeous visuals. Now to quickly cover these performance targets and set expectations, the footage released here I have been able to analyse, and these are very early and preliminary accounts, which does mean the quality of the footage makes pixel counting almost pointless, and as such I'm not really going to dive into those figures overall, but it does point to genuine X gameplay. Early counts show that this 4K resolution is not really a 4K output genuinely from the engine. It does look higher than 1080p, but it certainly doesn't look like native 4K to me from the early counts, but like I stressed, the quality of the capture here is not the best. With the engine's TAA improving that stability and aliasing across the board, it's still a very sharp and clean looking game. A lot of that comes down to the lack of post-processing evident in the game itself. Now a reconstruction element may also be included here to achieve the full output target, but I see no obvious signs or any obvious ghosting here, but it definitely uses a TAA with a very light element not to ruin the texture quality and the details shown here. Now again, from the X footage here, performance is targeting 60 FPS in both real-time cinematics and gameplay, and it holds pretty close to that, but there are points in the game which again point to it being genuine X gameplay, where that performance can drop down, and not really skipping any further than 33 milliseconds, aside a few streaming issues, but generally the game holds 60, and in battles it can drop down to the mid-50s and certainly high 40s in certain sections, but these tend to come very fleetingly when looking off into the distance, so the triangle culling here in the engine is doing all of its work, and sometimes you can just get slightly higher load on screen, which can affect that performance. It's still a beautiful looking game and a smooth one, and it must be commended that the 60 FPS target here on X is certainly a welcome one. Maybe they'll add in a resolution and performance mode, dropping it down to 30 FPS and pushing it up to a native 4K, I don't know, but for me, I just prefer to run it this way as it just feels better and looks better now that they've demonstrated the game this way. Now the expectation here is if the performance at this level on this particular hardware, remember the Xbox One X GPU is a pretty powerful 6 teraflop machine, that means that every other machine behind it in the console space, including the Pro, the PS4 and the Xbox One obviously, is going to struggle even more. So if they do keep their 60 FPS target across every platform, which is the likely target they will have, then it is very obvious that we could see sub 1080p on both the PS4 and the Xbox One, and maybe even just 1080p on the Pro. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out, but really I wouldn't get too hung up in terms of the image quality and the performance here, as it looks very good at this early stage and there's still many more months to come. Moving away from metrics into the game itself, obvious signs this is a current generation title include things like here where we're hiding the loading section, funneling you into a slow pacing section while it gently streams in the next area or goes to a cutscene. The game does not have any loading sections according to the descriptions from the teams themselves, and that's again a commendable treat that I've harped on about since this generation began. Next generation obviously seems to be pushing this even further. Incorporating SSD in both consoles means that we will largely see a very different design to games like this, where they'll no longer funnel you into slow sections or hide loading with sometimes annoying elements such as flying through space or even cutscenes themselves and just going straight into the next segment, because streaming will be much easier. Artistically and technically it's very impressive. Multiple light sources are used throughout the title itself, including dynamic objects such as laser blasts in corridors and fixed points. Your lightsaber itself casts light and shadow, casting around your body as you move it. Shadow map resolution is obviously slightly lower, you can see this here, and pop-in is obvious on shadow maps quite close to the frustum, both on character models and elements in the scenery. The material qualities themselves, the composite and obviously PBR based, I'm pretty sure they'll be using the photogrammetry elements and materials that DICE have worked on previous Star Wars titles, as it makes far more sense to do that than actually just remake them from scratch. In this very stylized and stylistic world, it has a certain metallic look to it, which they've successfully achieved, and this will be helped by reusing props and materials that DICE have used. The quality across the board is very high, from surfaces, specular, skin, leather. All of this adds up to a pleasingly beautiful game, both in gameplay and those real-time cinematics.
Visitation is not permitted.
The cost for 60 FPS frame rates does show at times. Many light sources in the title do not cast any shadows at all and may even just be baked into the actual asset themselves. And the Wookiees in the title are one of the lowest quality in there. That face is one only a mother could love, but overall it's still an impressive looking title. And this stems from multiple elements: that excellent use of particle systems as they emit out and then collide with objects' geometry and then slowly burn and fizzle out on the ground. This looks superb in action. And this is complemented by that scorched ember mark as your lightsaber cuts through enemies, leaving the trail of where you've been. Now, some people may bemoan the fact that dismemberment is not in the title. It's not really a common element of Star Wars games, but this is probably the Disney influence, and it is in the engine, as we see in a later trailer, as you slice through the robots and take their legs and arms and even cut them in half. So it may be the fact they've taken out for humans for obvious reasons, that Disney influence, or it's an actual element you can turn on and off in the game and they've decided to leave it off here because it is an E3 demo and all eyes will be on. You've always got to be careful of that outrage that can happen from time to time. Other elements such as screen space reflections are present across the title, both in horizontal and vertical elements, and again you can see the obvious artifacting signs as that foreground element of the character is reflected in the scenery again on the top section here. And then there's that absolutely excellent velocity based per object motion blur, which is carried through gameplay and cinematics and adds that cinematic flair and silky smooth, buttery smooth look to the game. They use this again with a lateral motion blur on the slow motion sections here, which give that element of your powers slowing people down. And I love the fact that they still gently follow you around and trying to move, even though they're aware they're frozen in time. They still try and attack in that frozen element. And this vector-based velocity blur carries over to both particle effects, alpha effects, geometry, character movement, per limb, per object. It's an essential part of a game looking as good as they do nowadays. And the fact that it's here and it's of such high levels of sample rate, you zoom in here and slowing it down, you can see how clean it looks. It really is an impressive visual treat at 60 FPS. Now, in addition to this, they're also using excellent use of lighting and shadow. They use contact hardening shadows on the objects themselves, maybe a form of proxy capsules, but it works superbly. You can see here on the Stormtrooper's feet as he's fighting with Carl. He moves around. You can see his feet getting thicker and darker as they are nearer the ground. And those soft feathered edges of the penumbra side as they're not actually fully occluded, and that umbra in the centre, that darker piece as it contacts the ground, and then as he falls his entire body intertwines and mingles between the penumbra and the umbra, giving that dark solid shadow as it's nearer the contact source. Physics are employed with that droid jiggling around at your back as you move. Your cape billows with the physics emulation. Obviously hitting enemies themselves, they react to you fall and heap on the floor with that physics simulation. And then in addition they've got volumetric light sources, atmospheric scattering off into the distance, bloom, all of those things that add to the atmosphere and the depth the game has. This shot here from the demo where you're swimming through a lagoon with that tessellated water, which is again evident in the demo here and again certainly in this trailer, fighting through AT-AT walkers in a swamp with that N64 like bloom and fog volume in the background, all of that being beautifully constructed and most likely voxel based, means it has ticked all those boxes on the visual elements and the animation of the game itself, both in the motion captured real-time cinematics, which were a big call on the actors, and the development system itself using very similar elements we've seen most modern AAA titles now, such as The Last of Us 2. And again, these elements add more to the game itself, both facial capture and combat, using all of those action sequences, choreographed sequences of battling, and then putting those into the game engine itself as move sets, and then blending and morphing between them smoothly to give the fluid dynamic action we see. As you combat enemies as they swipe at you, you can move out of the way, react to you mid-move, and kick and punch and slice people in true Jedi style. Obviously, in terms of the game itself and the visual quality, many references will go back to the last Jedi game, which was The Force Unleashed, and Force Unleashed 2 here, which you see on the PS3. It's still a great looking title and very impressive and enjoyable at the time, but this is really a league above. Not only does it look much better in terms of visual quality, character detail, animation, PBR based materials, and all those standard elements we've seen from the last gen update, but it's also 60 FPS, not 30. So even though that is a great looking title, this has already superseded that on pretty much every level going, except what it actually plays like once we dive in. But with Stig Asmussen at the helm, God of War 3 fame, I don't really have that many concerns that this won't be an enjoyable single player story romp that will mix up story, action elements, empathy, and some great gameplay moments that will be dramatic. And we've already had an appetizer of those here, and I'm hungry to see what Respawn deliver come closer to that November release. Anyway, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed my early look at Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. But if you like this or anything else, please like, subscribe and share where appropriate, and I'll catch you on the next one.
A Jedi.
Stop them. That's the plan.
The Jedi are not yet lost. Hope is not yet lost.
Yeah, I'm okay. You all right? No, we are not doing that again.